Clink from the Truesdale Corporation. He's going to do a presentation titled A Preservation Contractors Perspective, the Good and the Bad.
How many of you guys pay taxes? How many of you don't? That's who I'd like to network with. So Contractors Perspective. About a year and a half ago, a friend of mine, Mike Johnson with Caltrans, I think he's the supreme leader now of Caltrans or something like that. Michael, are you here? Great guy, does a good job. Asked me, he said, hey Clink, you do work in a lot of different states. Can you come and talk to this Western Preservation Society and kind of give us some things that we could do better? And I'm thinking, all right, well this would be interesting. Take 14 of my best clients and tell them what they're doing wrong. This ought to be good for business. But anyway, like a fool, I showed up and I did it. So imagine my surprise when I got invited to come again and now tell 50 states. But anyway, I'll try to throw in a few things that you're doing right. But frankly, from a contractor's perspective, I am going to point out some things that I believe we could do better. My name, as I said earlier, is Kurt Clink. I'm the president and CEO of the Truesdale Corporation. You're not going to see that logo. It's going to go away. By the way, there's going to be a lot going on these slides that I'm not going to hit every single point verbally. Just watch them if you want. Take some notes, whatever you want. I'm going to be available for another 30 minutes, and then I'm probably leaving. So the motto of our company, by the way, is I'm here to help, where H-E-L-P is honesty, excellence, leadership, and passion. And frankly, that is why I'm here today, too. I told Michael the same thing. I'll see what I can do to help, and if it helps you guys as a DOT, that'd be great. I'd also like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak. It is an honor. Truesdale Corporation, just to let you know from a perspective standpoint, we're in about 35, 36 states, so I've got experience with most of the people in the room, or not people, but your DOTs in the room. We don't have a lot up in the Northeast yet. In fact, if you're one of the gray states, there's probably something wrong with you. You're dismissed. No, I'm just kidding. We're just not there yet. We will. All these pictures, by the way, are jobs, projects, bridges we've worked on over the years, and if there's a story behind every one of them, a couple of my guys could tell you about it. Just from relevance, tell you what we do, and then I'm moving on about Truesdale entirely. We do a lot of repair, restoration, strengthening, protection, and maintenance, primarily of bridges, whether it be the superstructure or the substructure. In yellow here, you'll see a lot of what we do is bridge deck overlays. So when I'm talking today about the way we go out to bid, or the way you go out to bid and how we address it, you're going to hear a lot about, it's going to be in reference to bridge decks, the overlays, and the various types of repairs that we do to those. One of the things I want to point out, by the way, this is a perspective. So this is my perspective. It may not be the same as your perspective. It doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it wrong. Just because I say it doesn't mean you're wrong, and the picture should be self-explanatory. For those of you who aren't keeping up, I'm going to move on quickly. By the way, how can you increase, everybody hears, time and money. How many times have we heard, we don't have time, we don't have money. If we could increase, or I could increase your budget to do 20% more repairs with the exact same amount of money, who would be interested in that with a show of hands? Thank you. But there's 3 of you, fantastic. By the way, how many people pay taxes? Who's paying for the bridge repair? You are. We are. There's no grandiose federal government or state government that makes money. We all pay taxes, and that's where it comes from. So the farther we can stretch it, the better off we are. All of our bids and all of the work out there, by the way, is done via a contract, or almost all of it. It is a very litigious environment that we live in. Hence you saw the Darth Vader and the engineer concept earlier. It starts with a bid, and it's all about risk transfer, risk or ownership of the risk. Risk, by the way, equals cost. As a contractor, when you ask me to take a risk, I'm going to raise my bid, and it costs more money. So the question today is, how can you design and bid your projects to reduce the cost to the owner? And the key is to remove any unnecessary risk from the contractor when it's time to bid. Also when you're inspecting, but pretty much then the contractor's already decided. So a lot about what I'm going to be talking about today is how you design bids. I don't know that that's relevant for everyone in the room, but perhaps you're an inspector and you're out there, you might understand where a contractor is coming from, and just getting our perspective may be beneficial to you. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of things up on the screen I'm not going to read. I like to show that picture because this guy makes me look younger. Delivery method. By the way, most of what we're going to be talking about is design, bid, build, which is the most traditional method. You go out and get the money, you have a designer design some sort of repair, rehabilitation to a bridge, a bunch of contractors bid it, and then we go build it. It would be remiss if I didn't point out that there are state ordinances, almost all 50, where you have the opportunity to come up with some sort of alternative delivery method, whether it be a job order contract, whether it be a CMAR. You're all familiar with those, where you send out an RFQ as opposed to simply an RFP. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but the key is to match the delivery method with the actual job that you're trying to get done. A more complex, or maybe a proprietary project you're trying to get done, or a very special job, you might want to actually put out as an RFQ instead of an RFP. Pre-qualification practices, I wanted to point this out briefly. I'm not going to spend time on it either, but you can do it at the job level. Let's say you've got something very unique. You want to trade out straps on MSE walls from being steel to carbon fiber and you don't know who to do that, well, why don't you put out an RFQ and find out who out there has experience changing out metal straps or FRP straps on MSE walls, and you can put those pre-qualifications in the bid package. Financial limits, by the way, make sure, you might want to review these. Some of these haven't been reviewed in years, not to pick on any state by name, but their initials is Illinois. If you have cash in the bank minus your entire backlog is how much you can bid in that state. It must be all mafia people bidding in Illinois, because I can bid in every other state in the union, but the financial limits on their pre-qualifications seem to be, I'm missing that formula somehow. So you also have to have a crane for some reason, and I've done bridge rehabilitations for 24 years myself, 40 years, and we didn't need a crane. So you might want to review your pre-qualification packages on what's even allowed to be bid in your state. I'm going to explain that in a minute, why that's actually more important than you might think. Prior experience, skip that. The key is to achieve the best value, which requires adequate number of capable bidders, right? And we're going to talk, well, float equals flexibility. We were talking about that earlier. What you want is the adequate number of capable bidders to show up, and that's where you're going to get your best value. One bidder is often not the best value. Moving on to somehow you package the jobs out to bid. And as a rehabilitation contractor, I don't build any bridges, we just fix them. It's done it for 40 years, and fixing a bridge usually doesn't take a lot of time or money to do just one specific bridge. So as you guys know, you package 10 or 15 bridges into a bundle and set that out to bid. What I want to talk about is how you do that, how you structure it that might be more advantageous than some of the current ways they're being done. First off, the overall project size, like a financial limit. Sometimes these jobs are only 100 grand, 50 grand. And for me to mobilize from a centralized location, we might have 3 or 4 locations across the country, but still to get from Missouri to Kansas is take some effort. So to bury a mobilization cost into a very small job makes it difficult. You are probably determining who your general contractor is going to be by the size of the job overall. And typically speaking for me, and most contractors, bigger is better. Geographically, now we're talking about the footprint of the actual 10 locations that you want fixed. If you have 10 locations, or you happen to just, this is the money, and you prioritize them, I can understand how this is a priority number one, this is a priority number one, let's put them out in the very first package. But they're 160 miles apart. That makes it very difficult to try to get any synergy between those. If you can combine that into a smaller cluster of projects, bridges, you're going to find it's far more synergistic, it's efficient, and we can bid those for a lot less cost than when the project is very spread out. It's very common, by the way, that March comes along and we'll bid 10 bridges in this region, and then May comes along and we'll bid 12 bridges right here that they're intermixed. We'd love to win both jobs, but if you could combine them into smaller clusters, it would be more advantageous to a contractor. Scopes of work, fewer is often better. The key here is actually to remember that the primary scope of work often decides who bids prime. If you want your painters being the prime contractor on the job, then make sure that painting is the biggest scope of work. A lot of state DOTs, or state ordinances rather, insist that the general contractor perform 30, 50, 70% of the work with its own forces. In order to do that, oftentimes the largest scope of work on a job determines who's going to bid prime. So sometimes I'm bidding prime to a guy who's a sub to me. He might be a traffic control guy or a painter, and oftentimes the reverse is also true. So remember, the primary scope of work determines who's going to bid that job prime, which can definitely affect your cost. Working hours, days or nights. Sometimes people combine. When you're putting a project out to bid, you want to think about a crew. I can't send a crew out to work Monday morning and Tuesday night and then Wednesday morning again. They're going to either work days or nights, so try to keep it consistent. Project duration, scheduling working days versus completion date. Key here, some float is often better, flexibility is better. Float equals flexibility equals attractiveness. Attractiveness, well, who cares, right? Well, the more attractive a job is, the more bidders you're likely going to get. How many people have only had one bid or no bids on a project before and you wonder why? It's an ugly job. Good and the bad and the ugly, right? Nobody wanted to bid it. How many people have had 10 bids and all of a sudden it was under 30% under the engineer's estimate? Right, you love those, right? So did we. We actually liked that job. It was an attractive job. That's what caused us to go there and decide to bid it. So make sure you're trying to build in some way to make it more appealing to the contractors to bid. And one of those is to give us some flexibility on the schedule. Yeah, you'd like it done in 30 days. So would we. We have no desire to take 40 days. That costs a lot more money. We want to get it done as fast as you do. But giving me some flexibility, and I'll point out right now, is not necessarily because I'm going to take more time, but because I have other jobs to do. We don't have 40 guys sitting around waiting to come out and do your little repair on that one project. We've got 100 guys that are all out there doing 100 different jobs, and if we can fit yours in nicely, like a Tetris puzzle, That makes it far more economical to do your job, which means if you think it's going to take 30 days, give us 90 on the contract, and that way gives me some float. Either I can start it a month later, or I can squeeze it in when it works in our schedule. It's due to fit, not due to acceleration. So give us more time, not because we're going to slow down, more time because we can fit it into our schedule better when it's more attractive. Incentives do work, by the way. How many people would like $250,000? I love it how people don't raise their hand on that one. I don't know why. If you're going to save money by getting done faster, share some of the money. We obviously are incentivized by that. We have no problem. We love to actually cash that check, and it does work. We will actually get involved. We will try to find a way to get that job done faster if there's a financial reward. That's why we're here. We're from the private sector. This is, I hope that works. This is probably the key point of the whole thing. This is one of my passion things I like to talk about, is the closure hours. It's very common in the state of California to do a job in very short closure hours, and they think they're saving money. What I'd like to point out is sometimes when you're evaluating the cost of a project, it's more than just the impacting traffic. You need to consider safety, you need to consider the total cost, and I'm going to go through that and show you what that impact might have. Here's an example of a closure hours in California, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. So basically you have 6 hours to work. You got a half hour to set up traffic. You got 4-hour cure by the specification, because Sika can't make a product that cures any faster. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't say that. And a half-hour takedown. So basically that leaves you 1 hour to actually work. Everybody follow that? 6-hour closure gives me 1 hour to work. That's just all there is to it. So imagine if you then, oh my, you can't believe it, a contractor asked for additional time, right? How about let's close at 10 o'clock instead of 11? That's a 1 hour difference, so basically there's a 7-hour closure now. Still same half-hour traffic setup, 4 hours of cure, still by the specification, half-hour traffic takedown, gives me 2 hours to work. Twice as much time to work. Same example, let's say you had that same 6-hour closure with 1 hour to work. I have to pay my union crew, by the way, 8 hours. I still pay that traffic closure to close the lane. I can get 5,000 square feet done in an hour, so in that 1 hour I got 5,000 square feet done. And let's say my cost for that was $10,000. So that is now $2 a square foot. 5,000 square feet, and I did $10,000. Take that same 7-hour closure, I have 2 hours to work, same 8 hours to pay for my union, same traffic control closure, and I'm still getting 5,000 square feet done per hour, but now I got 10,000 square feet done. 10,000 square feet, same $10,000 cost. My cost is now $1 a square foot. A small change in closure hours can double the cost of the work. That's something people often don't contemplate, but we're doing a bid, and I've got my chief estimator sitting here today. What are the closure hours are the number one thing? And you think you're saving a lot of money by cutting that 1 extra hour out, but it just costs twice as much to do that job. How many more repair jobs could you do if you could do them for half the cost? Anybody? Right? Simple math. Same example, by the way. Let's do that same 6-hour closure, 1 hour to work. By the way, let's say you had a job was 50,000 square feet to do, and I got 5,000 square feet done per day, right? That's what the example we used. That job now takes 10 days, right? 5,000 square feet into 50, anybody can do that math in your head. Same job, but you gave me that extra hour that I asked for, 7 hours to work. So now I got 2 hours done, or 2 hours to work, same 5,000 square foot per hour, but I got 10,000 square feet done every day, same 50,000 square foot job. I got the job done in 5 days instead of 10 days. A small change in closure hours can double the time for the work. Question now is really, which one is actually cheaper? 5 days at 7 hours or 10 days with only 6 hours? I propose the 5 days at 10 hours, or excuse me, you heard the math, is much more cost effective for you. Another hour can cut cost by 50%, another hour. Moving on to bid schedule. There's efficient number that works, and there's numbers that don't work. A very good number is somewhere between 20 and 30 bid items. For some reason, the County of Los Angeles is compelled to have probably 600 or 700 bid items on a job. That makes it very difficult to actually change anything at the last minute, for instance. Too many means it's more cost. You've got divide up a lump sum item between 30 items, and when it's normally 70 cents, I'm not just going to charge $1 because I'm going to round it up. So all those rounding errors usually end up costing a job more. So 20 to 30 is usually the best number. Key is to match the complexity of the job with the complexity of the project. Obviously, some of the bigger jobs do require more. This is just an opportunity. You were talking earlier about some of the guys get to get out in the field, some don't. This was the Hoover Dam Bypass Bridge built by Obayashi. We were privileged enough to get out on. I'll just show you a few pictures just for fun, actually, to lighten the mood. Here's the inside of one of those arches. This is approximately where I passed out trying to get up in there. A view from up on top, talk about a contractor's perspective. That's looking downstream. This is Charles. He retired about a month and a half ago. I think he's actually resistant to come back. If I'm not mistaken, the Arizona and Nevada state line was between he and I. He's on the Nevada side, and let's see, gambling and prostitution is only legal on that side of the bridge. This is the Hoover Dam bypass. Contingency bid items. Everybody always has contingencies. You're trying to get something done, right? You know, hey, by the way, we got to do all this bridge deck overlay, and there's some stuff up on top we want to get done. So you throw those in at the last minute. It happens a lot, but those can often change the way a job is bid and sometimes change who actually wins the job. So it's an ancillary item. Be very careful not to establish a unit price when we don't know what the quantity is. If there's one of them, it's going to be expensive. If there's 10,000 of them, I can do them really cheap. So to put one of them in there just to make it up isn't necessarily the most cost-effective way to bid. Sometimes an allowance is the best way. You might put a force account in there. Nevada does a good job at that. Hey, we don't know how much there is, but it's a ballpark. We think it's going to be about 100 grand worth of force account. Throw it in there. You just took all the risk off of me. That job just got cheaper. I know there's something in it for me. I'm going to get my cost recovered, and you've already got your budget allocated, as opposed to throwing some ancillary item in there that might sway the bids one way or another. Key there is don't let an ancillary item dictate who wins the bid. I'm going to go through three categories real quickly on some other contract specification requirements. And some that are risky, some that are unnecessary, some that are inappropriate. And as promised, in 2 minutes, I'm just going to stop. But there's enough risk out there already. You've seen most of these pictures before. So to add risk in the bid environment just isn't advantageous to anybody. Unsound concrete is probably one of the most common out there. Some states say that there's 10% of the bridge deck is unsound. Some states throw 1 square yard. Be careful to actually not throw out some number that has no rhyme or reason to it. Making one bid item incidental to another is dangerous. Louisiana, I think, did that, and I think they've changed it recently. For instance, we're going to do an overlay on a very big bridge, but all the deck patching, just kind of throw that in there. Well, we'd have to estimate somehow how much we think there is. So somebody got a little lazy and decided not to even quantify it, but throw it in as incidental. My overlay is going to be twice as much as it normally would. Tell me how much you want me to bid. Tell me, then I can bid the overlay as competitively as possible, and we can move forward together. Unnecessary bid items, excessive cores, excessive testing. Some of those, New Mexico actually, I think they're out of it now, they finally figured it out, but they were asking for a plotter on every single job. They have warehouses full of plotters that they don't know, well, I shouldn't say they don't know what to do with them. They know how to use them, nobody uses them anymore. A field office on a 1 or 2 week job, sometimes there's still field office required. I understand on a big job, the engineer needs a place to sit down, but on a 1 or 2 week job, he's gonna sit in his truck. So to put a field office on a job that's only 1 or 2 days long, you might wanna think about not doing that. Specifying exclusive means and methods. I have another slide on that in a minute. We'll go, oh, that's a key point right there. At the very end, don't fall for we'll make the contractor pay for it. If there's anything out there I actually want you to remember, how many of you pay taxes? Right? The engineers, designers, best of intentions, they just keep throwing stuff on there. I heard the guy from Texas say, you know what, we can't afford to be safe enough that still can't get our, whatever that terminology was. Do you remember he just said that just a few minutes ago? I thought it was a great commentary on what I'm trying to say. After years and years of specification writing, there's so much red tape in some of these specifications that it's just very burdensome to try to come out and bid those jobs. And you just say, well, we'll just make the contractor pay for it. No, I'm not paying for anything. I'm trying to make a profit. So there's the guy. So 100% of what you put in the specification, I'm going to put in my bid, right? You're paying for it. And by you, I mean you as a taxpayer, because it's going in my bid anyway. So there's no such thing as making the contractor pay for it. We're just going to charge the state eventually. And if we got caught on this bid and left it out, we're definitely putting it in our next one anyway. Units of measure are important. Make sure it's 2-dimensional is appropriate versus 3-dimensional. Pick the one that makes sense. Sometimes cubic foot makes a lot more sense than square yard, for instance, on a furnish. I don't know how thick it's going to be. I'm not in control of the current grade of the deck, but you've given me requirements for the finished grade of the deck, and the thickness, I don't know that, nor could I. So a volumetric unit of measure makes more sense, a 3-dimensional. And you can see the rest of them. We just bid a job in California, District 11, for some reason where they wanted labor, materials, equipment, subs, traffic control, all of it in the labor hour. I would call that inappropriate. I don't even know how to bid that. I was like $6,000 an hour. I didn't win. You're talking about some bolts missing out of a guardrail, by the way, or off the barrier rail. I've seen many times, hey, replace all the missing bolts. How many are there, right? So in some cases, that's just a lump sum item, and it's very difficult to bid. So, you know, I have to assume that at least, what, 20%, 30% of the bolts are missing, and you don't know if that inspector is going to argue. So use your opportunity to get in it, give us a quantity that you believe makes sense. Traffic control, last thing I'll probably finish because I'm done, is State of New Mexico and a few others actually put it out as a unit price. So every day, here's how much you're going to get paid for traffic control. In theory, you have removed the risk for me, and I appreciate that, but you've also hurt yourself because I can't be more competitive. If you have 60 days in the bid, but our crews are very efficient, and I think I'm going to get it done in 30, I want to be able to equate that savings into my bid and put 30 days worth of traffic control in there. But I can't. I have to put all 60 days worth of traffic control in there. So part of the savings of being efficient is removed when the traffic control is bid by the day, and I plan on getting it done faster. You'll notice I said sometimes or most times down there. And I'm literally going to, if anybody wants to take pictures of the slides, I think they're available, but my time is up, so I told you I'd move on.
Is this on? Okay, so I appreciate the fact that you work across different states and for different owners, DOTs. So how problematic or not is it for the different state specifications for the same work items for you to contend with, and also their approved products lists? And do you think that there could be a lot more commonality amongst the specifications and approved products lists?
If I back up one slide, you'll see there's some of the best practices right there, the slide I would have brought up, and absolutely that would be beneficial. In fact, if they were just named the same thing, when it's time to search them to find out where the jobs are that I want to bid, would be beneficial. Out of 50 states, there's probably about 40 different names for the same scope of work. I mean, it's a multi-layer polymer overlay or a epoxy thin bonded overlay or a polymer concrete overlay. So the naming alone is one thing. It's just a nightmare to keep track. We have, talked about 1,000 bridges. We have 1,000 spreadsheets, one for each state, basically, or 50, that says what the APL is. We prefer, actually, performance criteria. Just tell me, hey, you want an epoxy that can do this, has elongation of this, has, permeability of this. Whatever those performance criteria are, and then keep those consistent. But we find many states also have an APL. I'm not sure I answered your question.
I guess what I'm getting at is I'd like to see the DOTs, at least regionally, work together to get more common approved product lists and more common specifications.
That makes two of us. Absolutely.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.